When it comes to serial killers, more often than not, they're men. But every once in a while, you hear stories about these savage women who slay a bunch of people, typically in very cunning ways. Leonarda Cianciulli was an Italian woman, fortune teller, and soap shop owner who fit that description perfectly. She is said to have slain at least 3 women and turned their flesh into soap and tea cakes. Now, how insane is that? Now, by the time that Leonarda went after her first victim, she had already been through the ringer. Her mom was basically forced to marry her father, so Leonarda grew up in a super toxic and abusive home. Leonarda tried to end her own life on 2 separate occasions before marrying a dude in 1917 who her mom absolutely hated. Because of that, her mom put a curse on her marriage, and Leonarda was extremely superstitious about it. Over the course of her marriage, Leonarda got pregnant 17 times, had 3 miscarriages, and lost 10 of her other children when they were babies, which left her with only 4 of her 17 children. When World War II came around, Leonarda's husband left her, and her oldest son, Giuseppe, told her he'd be enlisting in the army. Now, considering the amount of loss Leonarda had already experienced throughout her life, she didn't want to lose Giuseppe too. So that's when she was like, oh, the only way to protect my son in the war is to make human sacrifices to God, because that makes total sense. With that being said, let's meet victim number 1, Faustina. One day, Faustina confided in Leonarda about her loneliness and desired to find a husband. In response, Leonarda said she knew of a nice single man in a nearby town who would be a great fit for her. Leonarda told Faustina that she'd write him a note and arrange a marriage for the 2 of them. Whoa, not even a first date? She told Faustina that he agreed to get married to her and said she had to travel to his hometown so they could be together. So Faustina, who was desperate for a companion, packed her things and planned to elope and move in with her new beau. But her beau didn't exist. It was a setup. Oh, snap! Now, December 17, 1939 was the day Faustina was set to move. Before leaving, she went over to Leonarda's for one last visit, which ended up being her very last visit with anyone, ever. So when Faustina came over, Leonarda convinced her to drink some wine to celebrate her new life. The wine was poison. After Faustina collapsed on the floor and took her last breath, Leonarda drained her vital fluid into a bowl and chopped her body up into 9 pieces with an axe. Fucking yikes. Now, this wasn't your average slice a body up and dump the pieces crime. Instead, Leonarda boiled the pieces in a large cauldron and got out all the supplies needed to make soap. Yeah, soap, like the kind you use to wash your hands, wash your body in the shower and all that stuff. Now, once the body parts were boiled to Leonarda's liking, she added 15 pounds of sodium hydroxide or caustic soda, which is an ingredient typically used to make soap. Only Leonarda didn't turn this mixture into a bar of soap, thank God. Can you imagine washing your hands with melted body parts? Ew, gross. Instead, Leonarda stirred up her human soup until all of the bits and pieces dissolved into a thick, dark mush that was poured down a septic tank nearby. But Leonarda wasn't finished there. Remember how I told you she drained Faustina's fluid into a bucket? So she waited for it to coagulate and then stuck it in the oven to dry up. From there, she ground up the crusty DNA and mixed it with sugar, butter, flour, chocolate milk, and eggs. Sugar, butter, and flour. This is like the horror version of Waitress. But instead of pies, Leonarda made tea cakes that she served to her friends and family, including her son, Giuseppe. Gross. Yuck, dude. This girl is whack. And after that, Leonarda took all of Faustina's life-saving as payment for her matchmaking services. So at this point, you're probably wondering, didn't people notice Faustina missing? Well, I'm sure you can already tell Leonarda was a sneaky woman. She thought this whole thing out for a while because she made Faustina write a bunch of notes to her friends and family to say she wouldn't be in touch with them much because she was moving and getting married. But she reassured them that everything was fine and she was doing well. Little did they know, Faustina had been poured into a septic tank and cooked into tea cakes. Dude, what the fuck? All right, anyways, so now let's move on to victim number 2, Francesca. Francesca was a kindergarten teacher who was looking for a new job. Leonarda told her that she could get a job at an all-girls boarding school in another city. She said everything was set up and directed Francesca to write letters to her friends and family, just like she did with the other victim. And then on September 5th, 1940, Leonarda offered Francesca a glass of wine. When Francesca went limp, Leonarda grabbed her axe, bowl, and cauldron and did the same thing with her body as she did Faustina's. Also, I wonder what the family thinks about what these tea cakes taste like. That's what I want to know. Really, seriously. Leonarda then made Giuseppe send out the letters. He didn't know what they were for, but he did as his mother said. And after that, she stole money from Francesca, which again wasn't much, but Leonarda had no problem pocketing it. And now for victim number 3, Virginia. Virginia was a former opera singer who was in her mid-50s. One way or another, she linked up with Leonarda, who told her she'd get her a secretary job with an impresario, aka a producer in Florence. Virginia stopped by Leonarda's pad, probably to discuss the made-up gig, and in true Leonarda fashion, she gave Virginia a glass of wine and reached for her ex. But instead of only making tea cakes, Leonarda turned some of Virginia's melted remains into soap. But then again, I guess I'd rather wash my hands with the deceased than actually eat them. As her final move, Leonarda snatched Virginia's money, jewelry, clothing, and shoes. Because hacking her with an axe and turning her into a knockoff Irish Spring bar wasn't good enough, now onto the good part, catching Leonarda. So Virginia wrote notes like the other two girls. When her sister-in-law got the letter Virginia wrote her, she suspected something was up. Virginia's sister-in-law started getting more and more suspicious, so she finally went to the police to report Virginia as missing. She told the officers that the last time Virginia was seen, she went over to Leonarda's house. At first, Leonarda acted like she had nothing to do with Virginia's passing, but when the authorities began pursuing her son Giuseppe, Leonarda immediately confessed to everything. Since a literal world war was going on, Leonarda wasn't taken to trial until 1946, which was 6 years after she was initially caught. And finally, on June 12, 1946, she took the stand and confessed to her crime. She acted almost proud of what she had done. Leonarda's trial lasted almost a week. The court had a hard time believing a woman could dissect a human body with such speed and precision all by herself. So to settle the debate once and for all, Leonarda was allegedly taken to a morgue where she proved her talent by cutting up a corpse into 9 pieces in less than 12 minutes. Wow, that's fast. Wait, why would they willingly allow her to do that to somebody's body? About a week after her trial began, Leonarda was found guilty and sentenced to 3 years in an asylum and 30 years in jail. With that, it was off to the asylum for Leonarda, and that's actually where she stayed for the rest of her life until passing in 1970 from cerebral apoplexy. During her time in the asylum, Leonarda wrote a memoir titled An Embittered Soul's Confessions. In her book, Leonarda touched on all the best practices for turning human body parts into soap. Oh yes, because I've been looking specifically for a guide like that. Although Leonarda is no longer with us, her stories will most definitely be in our nightmares forever. Thank you for that. So here's where things get tricky, as they normally do in most criminal cases. What was Leonarda's motive? She believed she could protect her son by sacrificing other humans, which makes absolutely no sense. In what world does slaying 3 innocent women protect your son in a world war? I don't know. And even though Leonarda was superstitious AF, there aren't any religious ideals out there that talk about sacrificing humans. Roman Catholics actually forbid the act, as it is believed to be an abomination before God. A lot of people believe she battled with a mental illness along the lines of anxiety or depression, or a mix of both. If you think about it, the woman lost 13 of her kids in horrific ways. On top of all that, the woman was born into an awful situation, cursed by her mother, and left by her husband. It's safe to say she was not in a good mindset. And the fact that she literally gave friends and family tea cakes and soap bars made with human flesh, now that's disgusting. On that note, I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Thanks for watching.